What does it mean to be an immigrant? Today, we often think of immigrants as people who move from one country to another in search of work, safety, or a better life. But what if the people who later became immigrants once considered themselves citizens of the same political community? This session explores the remarkable stories of pioneer Sylheti settlers in Britain through Caroline Adams across 7 seas and 13 rivers. Their experiences challenge conventional understandings of citizenship, migration, belonging, and identity. We will examine how colonial subjects of the British Empire traveled to Britain as seamen, workers, and wartime contributors, only to find themselves later categorized as immigrants and racial outsiders. When we hear the word immigrant, we usually assume that a person has crossed the boundary of a nation-state. However, the stories in this book challenge that assumption. One elderly Sylheti settler explained, "We were born under British rule and we were the citizens of this country. I didn't come here as an immigrant. I came here because I was asked to come." This statement forces us to rethink migration itself. The speaker was born in British India. At that time, Britain and India were connected to a vast imperial system. Movement between colony and metropole was not understood in the same way that migration is understood today. For these men, Britain was not a completely foreign place. It was the center of the empire under which they lived. The question, then, is not simply why they came. The question is, how did citizens become immigrants? To understand the story, we must begin in Sylhet. Caroline Adams describes Sylhet as a region of rivers, floods, trade routes, and long histories of mobility. The book notes, the people of Sylhet are seafaring people, because it is in their blood. While this statement reflects local cultural narratives, the actual reasons for migration were far more complex. Economic hardship played a major role. Families struggled with limited opportunities, land fragmentation, fluctuating agricultural prices, and colonial economic transformations. Migration became a strategy for survival. Yet migration was not only about poverty, it was also about aspiration. Young men watched returning sailors who had traveled across oceans and brought stories of distant lands. As one interviewee explained, sometimes a man might have been away for 6 months or a year, and everybody would come to see him. Migration offered prestige, adventure, and social mobility. It represented a possibility of transforming one's future. For many Sylheti men, the journey began with a difficult trip to Calcutta. From there, they joined merchant ships as lascars, Asian sailors employed on British vessels. One participant remembered, "My parents wouldn't agree, so I ran away, pinched my mother's savings, and came to Calcutta." These journeys were risky and uncertain. Life at sea was extremely hard. Workers faced dangerous conditions, long periods away from home, racial hierarchies, and exhausting labor. Yet thousands continued to join the shipping industry. Why? Because the ships offered access to a world otherwise unavailable to rural villagers. Migration was not merely movement. It was a strategy for survival, advancement, and possibility. The British Empire itself created these migration pathways. Empire connected ports, labor markets, and transportation networks across continents. The movement of Sylheti sailors was therefore deeply linked to imperial economic structures. The contributions of colonial subjects to Britain are often forgotten, yet they were essential to the functioning of the empire. Caroline Adams writes, "Their services and those of the thousands of Indian seamen who died in that conflict were vital to Britain's survival." During the Second World War, merchant sailors transported supplies, food, fuel, and military equipment. Many died at sea. Others faced enemy attacks, harsh weather, and dangerous working conditions. The elderly settler quoted earlier expressed frustration that these contributions had been erased from public memory. He stated, "Without the Indians, West Indians, and all the others, Britain wouldn't have lasted more than a few days." His words remind us that the history of Britain cannot be separated from the history of empire. The prosperity and survival of Britain depended upon labor and sacrifices from across the colonial world. Yet recognition of these contributions remained limited. After leaving the ships, many Sylheti men remained in Britain. Some settled in London, Liverpool, Cardiff, and other port cities. They established boarding houses, businesses, community organizations, and later restaurants. These pioneers laid the foundations for what would become one of Britain's largest Bangladeshi communities. The book explains, after leaving the ships, they settled in the cities of Britain, where their presence was the stimulus for the migration from Sylhet. Migration often operates through networks. One person arrives, then relatives, neighbors, and friends follow. Over time, individual journeys become community histories. East London eventually became a major center of Bangladeshi life and culture. Yet settlement did not guarantee acceptance. This is where the story becomes especially important for understanding citizenship. The men who arrived before the end of empire often considered themselves British subjects. But after decolonization, political realities changed, new nation-states emerged, new borders were created, new immigration controls were introduced. The same people who once moved within an imperial system increasingly became categorized as foreigners. The language of citizenship changed. The language of belonging changed. The language of race became more powerful. People who had once contributed to Britain's economy and wartime survival were now increasingly viewed through the lens of immigration. This transformation illustrates a crucial lesson. Citizenship is not simply a legal status. It is also a political and social relationship. Who belongs? Who is recognized? Who is excluded? These questions are constantly negotiated and contested. Legal residence did not guarantee social acceptance. Many migrants encountered racism and discrimination. One interviewee recalled, "Now, my children get called black bastards and knocked over in the street." This statement captures a painful contradiction. Families who had helped build British society still experienced exclusion. Their children were born and raised in Britain, yet they were often treated as outsiders. This experience reveals the difference between citizenship and belonging. A person may possess legal rights while still being denied social recognition. A person may contribute economically while still facing discrimination. The history of Bangladeshi settlement in Britain demonstrates that inclusion is not automatic. Belonging must often be fought for, negotiated, and defended. The stories of pioneer Sylheti settlers challenge us to rethink citizenship, migration, and belonging. They remind us that migration histories are often deeply connected to empire. They reveal how political categories change over time. Most importantly, they show that citizenship is not simply about passports or legal documents. It is about recognition, participation, dignity, and inclusion. The journey from citizen to immigrant was not merely a change in legal status. It was a transformation shaped by empire, decolonization, race, and national identity. As students of global citizenship, we must ask, who gets to belong? Who decides? And how might we imagine forms of citizenship that are more inclusive, more just, and more humane?